It helps to get off on the right foot with doing the ketogenic diet. Now, there's so much information out there, I thought I'd distill this down into 9 very simple tips that you can utilize to get started on a ketogenic diet the right way. So let's go ahead and let's break them all down and get into the action. First one is not having so much fat when you first start. It used to be thought that you need to prime the body, get the body adjusted to utilizing fats, all this and that. Like the more fat that you consume, the more your body is going to learn how to use fat. And to a certain extent that's true, but when you get started, you're actually better off to keep it relatively low fat. And the reason is because it takes time for the mitochondrial machinery to build up. It takes time for the body to learn how to use a bunch of fats. So at first, if you just load a bunch of fats into your diet, it actually backfires. Okay, you don't have the bile production to digestively deal with that just yet. So it takes a little bit of time in that. You also have to factor in that you have certain things in your body, receptor proteins like PPAR alpha. PPAR alpha is what allows you to get adapted to using fats. PPAR alpha is only activated by fats that are liberated from our tissue. If we are constantly loading ourselves with dietary fat, we never get an opportunity to liberate the stored fat and activate the fat adaptation molecules that allow us to get the most out of the ketogenic diet in the first place. So during your first week of keto, keep it relatively high protein and a moderate amount of fat. I would usually say in a macronutrient range of maybe 50% fat, 40% protein, and 10% fibrous carbs. Okay, moving on to the next. Speaking of how much fat you should be having when you're first starting keto, don't worry about your ketone levels. When you're starting keto, everything's gonna be thrown out the window anyway. You're gonna notice that your ketone levels are extraordinarily high right when you start. If you're using those little urine strips, you're gonna notice that you're registering a lot of ketones. But you might get disappointed that 3-4 weeks down the line, that dramatically changes and you don't register any ketones. That's because a lot of times ketones are just measuring your excess amount of ketones, especially in the urine. Now, if you're measuring your blood ketones, it can be a little bit different. It's still important, but at the same time, ketones do not mean fat loss. So you don't automatically increase your amount of fat loss just because you have more ketones. You could pound a bunch of MCT oil, eat a bunch of coconut oil, drink some olive oil, and skyrocket your ketone levels, but it doesn't mean that you're burning fat. It just means you're producing and manufacturing ketones via what's called ketogenesis. So remember that fat loss at the end of the day is going to come from your body using your own fat to create ketones. So don't be afraid if your ketone levels aren't super high. It really doesn't matter. Next one is don't be freaked out about doing any kind of high intensity exercise. It's not gonna break things. It's not gonna mess things up. You might find that you end up having a little bit less performance at first, but it's a really important beginner tip to know that you should still go about your training the same way you normally would. Don't try to abruptly change anything. Don't make any drastic changes. Okay, cardio is still going to be best for fat loss. Weight training is still going to be best for building muscle. Okay, and weight training is going to allow your body to become very efficient at using both glucose and fats for fuel. So I see way too many people that just get concerned and they overthink it. Don't overthink it. Go about business as usual, and especially when you're starting keto, maybe do a little bit more of low intensity cardio so you can get your body a little bit more used to oxidizing those fats. The next one, you really don't want to be overly concerned with protein. People are going to tell you that you shouldn't be consuming a bunch of protein on keto. It's actually the opposite. Okay, here's the deal. Protein is what is called insulinogenic. It does spike insulin, but it doesn't spike your insulin in the same way carbohydrates do. It does not kick you out of ketosis. Extra protein does not get converted into glucose. And even the amount that it does, it's such a negligible amount. Most of what gets converted into glucose is actually going to be the backbone of a fatty acid. What that means is when you're breaking down fats as a fuel source, the glycerin backbone ends up going to the liver and gets converted into glucose. So it's not kicking you out of keto. Protein is still going to contribute to tissue repair. you would have to overconsume protein to the nth degree to ever have it kick you out of keto. So much so that kicking you out of keto wouldn't even be the big problem. The problem would be how many calories you're actually getting from protein at that rate. So at the end of the day, I would rather you have more protein than have more fats. So load up on the protein shakes, load up on the chicken breast, load up on the salmon, the good healthy stuff, and enjoy it. It's only gonna help you. Another thing that you might wanna do is check out ButcherBox down below in the description if you are doing keto. Just when it comes down to high quality meat, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, good chicken, really good wild-caught fish, just awesome stuff delivered right to your doorstep. ButcherBox is the jam, okay? It gets delivered to your doorstep, so you don't have to go to the grocery store, but grass-fed, grass-finished, so you're getting the omega-3 content that you're really paying attention to when you're doing keto. Anyway, it was a game changer for me, so there's a link down below for you to check out ButcherBox. Again, it's very economical, ends up being better than the grocery store in a lot of cases, simply because, well, first of all, you're not having to go to the grocery store, but the quality is there. So use that link, and a big thank you to ButcherBox for the continued support on this channel. So grass-fed, grass-finished filet mignons, ribeyes, grass-fed, grass-finished burger. It is delicious and utterly amazing. So again, link down below, check them out. So now I wanna talk a little bit about creatine. So creatine is not just good for, performance. Obviously, like when you are doing keto, you lose some ability to process carbs. You're not as efficient at glycolysis, which means that you're not going to feel the same way weight training or doing high intensity work as you would like ordinarily, right? So what you want to do is have small amounts, like 2 grams of creatine, and that's going to help you use a different energy pathway to maintain your strength. But it's also a powerful nootropic because we also produce ATP in the brain and need creatine for brain function. The ketogenic protocol is already amazing for brain function, and you add creatine into the mix with already a nootropic effect of keto as is, it just makes you that much smarter. You might get weak. You might feel kind of lame in the beginning, right? Well, there was a study that was published in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism that demonstrated that it's usually the lack of replenishment of sodium and other electrolytes that lead to people feeling the way that they do early stages of a ketogenic diet. So what that means is that when you first start keto, you can absolutely expect your body to excrete extra electrolytes. Insulin levels drop, which means you're going to lose extra water. That's kind of commonly known by every expert on YouTube, of course. But what ends up happening is when that happens, you're also excreting sodium. And by replenishing electrolytes, you're helping the nerve firing. Okay, some of the issues you feel in terms of fatigue and sort of neurological discomfort comes from the fact that you're not able to send a signal. Okay, your brain uses sodium, right? Sodium sends a signal from an action potential down a nerve. Okay, and what happens is potassium pulls sort of this sodium back and then releases the sodium back into the cell to allow the proper transfer of energy, So when you have a lack of any one of those, particularly in sodium, you're not able to actually have that action potential get to where it's going. It's very important that you replenish electrolytes. And I don't necessarily mean you have to sip on an electrolyte product or anything like that. I think it tastes good and it's beneficial, but just by making sure you get enough salt, enough potassium, magnesium in your diet, and don't be afraid of salt. Okay, it's a beginner tip that I wish I knew 10 years ago. Okay, 10 years ago when I was going through my weight loss transformation, I tried to cut a lot of the salt out because back in that day, there wasn't even a lot of delicious keto foods like there are today. So I was really eating close to the earth, and that means I was also in control of how much salt I would put on things, so I wouldn't put salt. And then I would realize I'd get fatigued. So the point is, you definitely want to do that. It makes a big difference. Don't be afraid to salt your lemons. Then, diversity of foods and micronutrients matter. They absolutely do. Okay, you've probably heard of people talking about carnivore and things like that, and I'm not opposed to that. Okay, but there's a difference between doing a very strict carnivore approach and doing a ketogenic diet where you are trying to get a wide variety. Carnivore works because it is exceptionally exclusive. Okay, you are excluding everything out of the diet to the point where you go down to such a basic protocol. Your body upregulates different processes. Okay, but there is no gray area. You are worse off doing carnivore with a smidget of a couple things here and there than you would be just saying, I'm not gonna do carnivore, I'm just gonna do a strict keto diet. Strict keto should look like a full spectrum, wide variety of foods. Okay, this is unbelievably important for your gut microbiome. As you start a ketogenic diet, you will have a negative shift in your gut microbiome for the first 2 to 3 weeks. then it rebuilds. And studies have demonstrated after 6 months, a properly crafted ketogenic diet is going to lend itself to a larger amount of different species within your gut. It actually improves gut microbiome diversity later on if you stick with it. Okay, but if you are not getting adequate micronutrients and adequate soluble fiber in and adequate fiber in general, you cannot allow the bacteria within your gut to proliferate. I've talked about this in other videos before, but it is so important that you get enough fiber to allow short chain fatty acid production to occur. I can assure you, at least in personal guarantee with that, is that you will see that your ketone levels improve. You will see that fatty acid oxidation improves, because there is so much evidence showing that an abundance of short chain fatty acids from high amounts of flax, from high amounts of chia, from artichoke, from asparagus, from things like that, chicory root even, inulin, psyllium husk, all those things, add them and do not be afraid of the fiber. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you. And lean into the soluble fiber whenever you can, because those short chain fatty acids that it produces can help you deal with glucose better and help you deal with fat better. It's just what you want to do. The next one is you have to commit for a few months when you first start. Okay, there's all this talk about cycling in and out of keto, which I'm a big fan of. Okay, but you have to commit for a few months first before you can really embark on that kind of stuff. Okay, if you just jump in and start doing keto cycling, you're not going to have the fat adaptation yet to allow yourself to really process both fuels properly. Your body's preferentially going to want to use glucose, so it's going to keep jumping back to glucose. You have to give yourself enough period of time to get fat adapted. And that usually takes, 2 to 3 months. You see, you have a level of what is called mitochondrial biogenesis, but also when your body is getting fat adapted, it takes 5 to 6 life cycles of your mitochondria before it establishes new abilities to use fat. So if you started keto today, next week you would have some new mitochondria formed, and they would have their new genetic ability to deal with fats slightly better. But then those mitochondria are going to die off in another 1 to 2 weeks and go through another life cycle, and you're going to have that next generation of mitochondria that's even a little bit more fat adapted, and then it generationally continues until you've reached equilibrium at about 5 to 6 half-lives. So that ends up being anywhere from 5 to 10 weeks before you're fully fat adapted. That's when you can start messing around with adding carbs into the mix. So don't jump into it too early. But my point in saying that is you have to give it the GI try for 60 or 90 days. You just have to, because that's when the benefits start kicking in. There is an absolute period where you might feel like dog crud as you're getting adjusted. You'll be fine. The next tip you need to know, and this is something that's real, do not schedule your cheat meals. Seriously, it messes you up and it creates an emotional attachment to your cheat meal. Okay, I was 100 pounds, like 110 pounds overweight before. Cheat meals are okay. Okay, but when you start scheduling them, you create this emotional relationship with them, okay? And you wanna make sure that you are not just establishing this consistent reminder that it's okay to reward yourself with food. It is okay to reward yourself with food, but you don't wanna have that ingrained in your mind. Okay, have a cheat meal and make it count. Okay, make it something that's gonna actually be worthwhile, but make it kind of impromptu. You don't wanna sit there and you don't wanna think about what your cheat meal is going to be sometimes. Sometimes it's better just to let it be a random thing that you consume.